So let's start, Kelly, by telling everybody where you grew up.
I grew up in East Texas, small town, East Texas, called Canton. It's about an hour east of Dallas, it's the middle of nowhere. And so I just grew up in the country.
Were your parents artistic at all? Where did you think you got your artistic flair from?
I get it mostly from my mom because she's a writer and she actually started painting recently. But my grandfather on her side was a writer as well and so forth. So I mostly got it from my mom. My dad is very analytical on numbers and everything like that. Like not even good at that. So mostly I got my creativity from my mom.
Who was a major influence on your writer's journey? Who helped you realize what you were doing and when you were doing it?
To be honest, I don't know on the top of my head. I don't have like a specific person that helped me do it. My mom was she was a major influence. She homeschooled us kids. So she was my teacher for English. So when I showed interest in writing, she was the one who was teaching me how to do it and encouraging me to write. So she was a major influence. But other than that, I didn't really have too many, influences outside of it because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just figuring it out.
Did you gravitate toward reading at all? Was reading a part of learning how to write for you?
Reading fan fiction was a major part because there were books and movies, not really books, but mostly movies, that I was like, but why did you kill this character off? What happened if? So I would read all the fan fiction. And when I first started writing, I actually began in fan fiction because I enjoyed that because that was a world that's already created. I didn't have to do that. I could just figure out the elements of writing and strengthen that. Then I could build my own world later in my own universe. So that's really where I started with my writing was fan fiction.
Yeah, you started pretty young too, right? You were just almost a teenager at a point when you started actually writing stuff that...
I was about 12. I had just had a major horse accident. And because I really wanted to get into horses, and after the accident, my parents were like, no. So you have to do something else. So I was like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? So I'm trying to figure it out. And so one evening I was washing the dishes and we have a window in the kitchen that was facing the west. It was sunset, beautiful sunset. I was like, I wonder if I could describe that in words. So I just went to my bedroom and I started writing. And, next thing you know, I wrote, basically it was like an essay, but it was a very descriptive essay. And so that's what, and I was like, oh, I actually really like this. So what if I could do something tomorrow and then go from there?
Have you looked back at any of those early writings and kind of, reminisced a little bit, or felt like, was there a foundation that you built from that helped you as you're writing now?
I do have the old writings, and I have looked at them, and they aren't that bad. So what it was when I first started writing, I didn't start with stories. I started with the elements, and I focused on description because to me, I felt like that was the hardest part to writing. I was like, that's really difficult. How do you describe something to somebody? So I focused on that, and because I started there, my descriptions now are just like amazing and very vivid, and just all my readers say they can see like a movie in their head, and it's very crisp and clear to them. And I think that's just because where I started, I focused on that, and I really wanted to strengthen that, and then I went on from there.
And movies obviously probably had an influence in how you wrote too, being so vivid and visual. And did you feel like the storytelling elements of movies, how they have a 3-act structure, they start right where they're supposed to start? Did you feel like that was an element that maybe you incorporated within your style right away? Or
well, the 3-act thing is not something I ever do intentionally. I might do it accidentally, but I don't do it intentionally. I just think of the story. I'm kind of like, okay, I kind of know where I want it to end. And I have these highlight points in the middle. And so if it has acts, it has multiple acts. So it's never like three act story. So I never think of it like that. People have said that. I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't think about that. What influenced me the most with movies is honestly the camera angles. Like you're looking at one character and then the character talking and the camera switches to the other character. And a lot of people don't think about it, but really what that is head hopping, if you think about it. And that's what my writing style is. And a lot of people have said, Kelly, you could easily translate your books into a script and it would be so easy to film because the way you write. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So really it was the way the camera moves things and how they show things. That's really how films inspired and really influenced my writing. As for the actual writing itself, I would have to say a lot of influence from fan fiction, because honestly, lots of traditional published books, I couldn't see them in my head. And if I can't see it in my head, I can't read it. And it's so frustrating. But fan fiction, there's something really organic and fresh about that it was like, it clicks in my head and I can see it perfectly. And I would stop and like, how did they do that? And why can I see it? So I would study how they would write. And then I was like, okay, then I would apply that to my own writing and so forth until I finally developed my own writing style.
I'm curious, when mentoring became a part of your life, was that something you did right away, or were you kind of easing into that? And how did it start for you?
Okay, first of all, I never had a mentor. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my mom was the closest thing to a mentor, but she doesn't understand science fiction. I love her to pieces, but she's a kid, science fiction and fantasy. She doesn't get it. So she kind of like, okay. Yeah. So she's more of a historical fiction kind of person. And so I was trying to figure it all out all by myself. And so when I finally became confident enough in my writing, I wanted to publish, I was like, I don't want that for anybody else. So if I find somebody who needs help, and if I have the resources, if I have knowledge, I will share it with them. I started involving myself in some Facebook writing groups and finding my voice in those and finding out who I really was in groups. Then that's when I started taking on more of a mentoring role. And nowadays I'm kind of like, I don't mean to be mentoring. I don't mean to be inspiring people, but I just do by accident. I'm like, awesome, great. I don't know what I did.
You're now getting into painting a lot more. I noticed a lot of really beautiful stuff, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, just amazing. When did painting come into your life, and what has it given you as an artist that writing doesn't?
Well, my mom recently started painting, like last year or the year before last. She started doing oil painting and beautiful work. And I have friends that do it. I'm kind of like, I don't know how you do that. But then I started watching some clips on YouTube of spray paint art. And I was like, that looks pretty easy. So I want to try it. And I really wanted to try it all last year, but my life was just totally insane. I didn't have the funds to go get the spray paint and everything else you need. So finally, my husband's like, you got this money, because I got paid for my royalties for books, because use the money to do your spray paint. I was like, oh, okay. So I started doing that this earlier in March, and I didn't think I was really any good of it until I posted in my Facebook group, and everybody seemed to really enjoy it. So I'm having a lot of fun. It's really hard. I thought it was going to be easier than it was, but it's going to take practice, a lot of practice. And unfortunately, I'm getting ready to move across the country again. So I don't have as much time as I wanted, but I'm going to be trying to still paint every day.
What do you like about it that is different about writing?
Well, my books, when I write, it takes me about 2 or 3 months to write a full book, whereas it could take me 30 minutes to do one painting, and I'll be done. So that's really nice. It's nice to have something done, and it's instantaneous kind of, and it's pretty. It's just a relief to have some form of creativity that I want, that's expressive of me in my hands. So instead of having to wait 2 or 3 months before I finish the book, and by the time I'm done with it, it's a mess. I have to go back and fix it and so forth.
After you're done with a painting, is it the same experience as done with writing? Do you, when you're finished with a book, right, do you sit back and kind of absorb it or go right into the editing, or do you kind of let it simmer a little bit and then, take some time away from it and go back to it? Is painting kind of similar? Because I would imagine it's not. I would imagine you're looking at something, you go, okay, this is finished, I'm good with it, and wow, this is beautiful, right?
Yeah, it's different. It is more instantaneous. I don't have to go back to really and edit it. There might be some time when I will do that. I haven't done that yet. I'm not there yet. But with my writing, I finish a book, and normally I have a backlog of books that I've already written. And so if I finish a book, I might go back to a previous book of mine that I finished 3 months ago, and then I go back, and it's been 3 months since I wrote it last. So I've had time to kind of forget how it was, and I can read it over with fresh eyes, edit that one, put that one away, and then start a new book. And then when I get done, I can go back and edit the one I had originally finished, and so forth. So I have this process of all these books because of how my backlog of books are. Now I'm doing it like per series. I have to edit and revise each book in a series. I write the entire series back to back, and then I go on and I write another series. And then when I finish that second series, I go back to the first series and I revise the entire thing and edit that, and then make sure that's ready for publication. And then I might move on to another, write a brand new series, and so forth. So it's constantly going back and forth. So I make sure I produce new work and go back and edit old work, and so forth.
Wow. How do you know when you're finished then? It sounds daunting a little bit.
Well, each series has its own,
Really?
I know where it's going to end. Yeah. I know what the story is. And now I basically can tell you how many books are in the series. Chronicles of Lorrek was not like that, but that was my first series. But now I can tell you which books are, how many books each series is going to have, and I get to a point when I'm editing revising, I'm kind of like, I can't look at it anymore. I can't stand reading it. I know exactly what happens. I can't stand it. I'm done. I don't care how bad it is. I'm done. So by then I'm kind of like, I'll let an editor look at it now. And then I just move on to write something new because I want to do something brand new. So.
Are you always thinking in series, or do you feel like you have a one-off in you at some point?
I am tired of series, actually. I have like 10 series in my head. And I told my husband, because he's my co-writer, I was like, I just want to write a few standalones. I want to write a series of standalones. It's a series, technically, but it's not. Each book is a standalone. And it's all my story, universe, and everything. I was like, this happened with this character. I kind of want to explore that. But it won't be a full novel, maybe. It'll be a very short novel. I just want to do a standalone. I don't want to do a series anymore. I want a break. And I haven't had that yet. So we'll see. What I've been doing is write like short stories. Just to have a break from the long novels, because it's been a terrible year for me, and I'm like, I can't think of stories complex, so I'm just going to do a short story because I need to write. So
do you feel like that's a much different process than writing a novel?
Well, in a way, because I don't have to plot out every sub-story, everything, all that sort of stuff. I could say, like in my story, I remember books, I'm like, okay, so we know that these two characters went off scene to go to do this. What happened? I want to write that scene. So my short stories are more like deleted scenes. That's what it's like. So it's not like huge, complicated short stories. It's just like, this is a deleted scene you can have if you got a DVD behind scenes kind of sort of thing. So,
is there anything about painting that's similar to writing for you?
I would have to say the vividness of my paintings. I love the color pops, and in my stories, I love to have the very vivid description and so forth. And of course, this right now I'm spray painting mostly, outer space kind of settings, which my stories have that too, but mostly it's the vivid. Like I started in description with writing, and so now I'm painting, and that's more like a very descriptive kind of form of art.
So you mentioned that you're co-writing with your husband right now. What kind of experience is that for you? How has that been different and unique for you, and how have you enjoyed it?
Well, I've co-written with a lot of people in the past because I used to interview authors' characters. And so I would be writing I would write me going into their story world, and they would write their character. So we would technically always be co-writing. And I did that a ton of times. That's actually how I first met my husband. I met him, we co-wrote an interview, and then I had to interview his character. And it was a terrible interview because his character was so shallow. I told him afterwards, like, so you're a really bad villain. Can you fix a little few scenes? And then he fixed it. And then he came back and interviewed the character again, and it was amazing. And then he just would stop talking to me. And so that's, what happened. But So, and I had previously written with co-written with actual books with a few friends of mine. So when we finally got to my husband, I knew how to co-write, and he'd never done it before. And so I said, okay, so this is what we have to do. And he's never published a book. He's written, but he's never published a book. And so I'm kind of more advanced than he is. So he depends on me to, help him with all that. So the first time is we wrote an entire series. That's the next series going to be published hopefully in August. And it was hard at first because we had a core idea. We knew what we wanted it to be, and we had to start and stop that story about 5 times before we finally figured out what version we're actually writing. And then once we did that, we literally wrote the first book in 2 weeks, and it was over 100,000 words. And then the second book was another 2 weeks, and then the third book was the hardest one to write, and that took a month or 2 to write. And then the other one's going fast. So it was a 5-book series. But what's fun about it, having a co-writer, because what we do is we don't just we don't have you write one chapter, I write another chapter. It's you have a character, a set of characters, I have a set of characters. We know what the story is. We know what the general idea, what needs to happen. Now we break it down to scenes. Your character's in the scene meeting with my character. This is what has to happen. Now action, basically. And we don't know how it's going to respond. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. So sometimes my character will say something and make his character blush. And I didn't mean to do that, but it happened. And it's hilarious. And so we're going back and forth, and we can literally write all day, even if he was at work, when he used to work at a hospital. And because he'll be on his phone texting and then emailing me, and then he'll go back to work waiting for me to respond. So we just go back all day. And that's why we managed to write 100,000 words in 2 weeks. And so that's a lot of fun when you have that energy coming. And of course, sometimes we don't have that because both of us are tired. 2020 was a terrible year and everything like that. So there have been times, though, when I'm like, you know what? We have to write the scene, and I don't feel like I can carry it. Can you please just carry it? I don't care. I'll just write the main character that I'm supposed to write, and all the secondary characters you can write. I don't care. And so he would do that. And then sometimes I would do that for him and so forth. And then when it comes to revision, I'm doing most of revision since I have edited and revised, novels of my own. I do most of that. And sometimes I might have him, I was like, this is your character. We need to fix up this scene. It can be stronger. And I explain to him how it can. Then he writes it. Then I make sure it looks good. And then we go on from there. So it's a fun experience. It's super addictive. And if I could just co-write all the time, there's so many people online who've told me they want to co-write with me. I'm I don't have that energy to write for everybody. But it's a lot of fun.
What did he think about the way you write in terms of writing the whole series out? Was he apprehensive about it?
No, he loved that because that means that we didn't have to stop writing and we just keep going. Because if I stopped writing, I would have to switch to another book. I'm going to keep writing no matter what. So he's like, no, I want to keep writing.
So you do all this writing. When do you find time for research? What is your approach to research? Are you somebody who does it up front, during, after? How do you approach the research process?
Okay, so I write lots of fantasy. And before I wrote fantasy, I did write historical fiction because that's what my mom was most interested in. And I did find some interesting historical stories. And so I studied the medieval times and so forth. So I did some in-depth research for that. So I already have that knowledge in the back of my head of how kingdoms and stuff like that, medieval politics work and everything. So I don't have to research that. But when I'm going forward, if I'm like, okay, I'm writing pirates in this story, I don't know much about pirates. I'll just go read up until I know enough, and then I keep writing. If I don't know something, if I'm not sure, if I'm bored, if I feel like something's boring, I'll go back and see if I could find something to spice it up and so forth. But I do not like to do a ton of research because that to me is where everything can get bogged down with storytelling. Because when it comes to new worlds, new planets, I don't care to figure out how far away from the sun it is, how big is the planet, I don't do that. I'm kind of like, they got on a planet to do this, then you get off the planet to do that, I might show it if it's unique kind of, atmosphere. I will show more detail with that, but I'm not going to go in and I'm not going to describe all those little things because as a reader, I wouldn't want that. I just want to know what's going to happen with the story. So.
What's the best advice you got that you think every writer needs to hear?
Well, it's hard to say because I wasn't really given too much advice when I was beginning.
What's the best advice you found then? What is the best thing that you found that helps you?
Well, I think it's important for writers, especially beginning writers, to not think too much about publishing that very first book. Just give yourself some time. Like, you can write it out, but don't publish it right away, because you just figured out how to write description, dialogue, build characters, also figure out structure, structure the plot, all this other stuff in your very first book. So now put that away and do it again. And maybe put that one away and do it again. And then go back to the first one and see how you like it. If you like it, or then you can publish it, go ahead, But if you don't like it, fix it, because you would have learned a lot. There's a lot of people who do that, kind of like, and then they come back to me later, like, I should have just waited. I was like, yeah, but it's okay. We can make it work. So.
Sounds like to me you subscribe to Hemingway's philosophy of you need to write 1,000,000 words before you can publish something.
Well, I don't disagree with that. Because it always happens. People are like, I shouldn't have published that first book. I was like, I told you, but no. This is why I agree with why I like fan fiction so much, because you can write fan fiction and post online if you want. I don't care about that. And then as you do that, you're developing your writing style, and then you might develop your own universe and write. And that first book you write would actually be pretty good. So go ahead and publish that, because you already have the practice.
What kind of fan fiction do you like to write? What fandoms did you write in?
I used to write Star Wars. I don't do it anymore. That was my little niche.
Is that because of the toxicity of the fandom, or is that just because you don't write fandom anymore?
Because I don't write fandom anymore.
Finished this 9-book series, right? And it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it has a definite end from whatever. I haven't myself read all 9, but I can tell that people have said this is the end. They're really sad about it or really excited about whatever. I don't want to give away what they're feeling about it, but for you, having accomplished that, having set a goal, set in mind that you had an end, you've reached the end. What do you feel like you learned from all of that? And what How different are you a writer now that you've actually finished something, and do you reminisce about it at all? Do you look back at that series and want to touch something else in that series, or once you finished it, you were done?
Well, all my series are in the same universe.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes, like the Chronicles of Lorrek is the first one I did.
Mhm.
And the series my husband and I wrote and are going to publish takes place like 40 years before the Chronicles of Lorrek and on a different continent.
Oh,
Some
neat.
characters you will recognize because you're younger. And then another series that my husband and I are writing, in the process of writing, takes place like a year after the Chronicles of Lorrek. You still see similar main characters, or familiar main characters, but the main characters of the Chronicles of Lorrek are no longer the main characters. They're more like side characters that are there. But then you see other characters, so you get to see. So I'm still exploring my universe. The story isn't technically at the end, but the Chronicles of Lorrek, I'm like, this story is done. To me, each series is like a book, and each book in the series is like a chapter. Mm-hmm. So when I finish the series, I'm kind of like, okay, I finally finished that, and I'm very satisfied with how it ended, how it wrapped up. I was like, that is the end for that. That's that. If you think of it, though, I have so many spin-off series that's all like a chapter in a bigger book, and so and it's really fun to go to the other series and to dive into. Like I said, the series my husband and I are publishing soon goes back. And so it actually follows other characters, some very minor characters that you meet, but you get to, because you keep hearing these stories told in the Chronicles of Lorrek, but then you actually see it unfold in this whole series. And then the one after that, you have this entire thing that happened at the end of the Chronicles of Lorrek is major, and so like, okay, how do people deal with that kind of sort of thing? And so you see the aftermath of it from other characters' perspective and so forth. I have no intention of leaving my universe anytime soon because so many different levels and so many different stories and so forth. I'm not planning that. I don't mean to do that. It just happens.
For people who don't know, Lorrek is kind of based off of Loki. He has that Norse god trickery element to him, and so I'm kind of curious, when and how did you know that he was the one to tell this story?
Well, I was watching Thor, like the first movie, and I was watching Loki, and I was like, what if he was actually not a bad guy, just like terribly misunderstood? and so I took that idea, because I really like how Tom Hiddleston played Loki and everything, and I took that idea and I just ran with it. And you have this, mischievous, sorcerer who nobody believes being the one who's the protagonist. And it's a lot of fun because a lot of my readers, when they first start off, they're kind of like, I don't know if I trust him. I don't know if I like him. I'm kind of like, just keep reading. And then they get to some chapter and like, oh, okay. So I like that, because even whenever I write, like if I go back and I write short stories based on his series and so forth, I'm always like, he always surprises me because he's not your traditional, protagonist. He doesn't have it all together. He lacks tact terribly. He has to say things bluntly. He's like, oh, sorry, that hurt your feelings. And he's also very mischievous and flamboyant if he feels like it, because everybody keeps blaming him for everything that goes wrong. And so he kind of just takes that and he's like, okay, well, everybody's going to blame me for what goes wrong, so I might as well just, take the credit for it, And so it was interesting to write a character like that, because he's unique and he's not your traditional, hero and everything like that. So that's why I really wanted him to be the main character.
Did you look at a lot of Norse mythology to kind of round him out a little bit?
Not really, actually, because I didn't want to be inspired. I didn't want to be influenced. I didn't want to make him Loki, because Loki isn't exactly the best person. And so I just wanted to just have that basic idea of him being a mischievous sorcerer, but who's misunderstood and blamed for bad things that happen and so forth. So I really wanted to focus on that. So I didn't study too much. I mean, I have studied a lot of Norse mythology just because I do enjoy it, but that wasn't my reason for doing that.
When does a character take shape for you? When do you feel like you have a grasp on a character?
Sometimes right away, a character pops in my head and says, okay, this is who I am, this is how I act, and this is what my story is, and this is why you will write me. I'm like, oh, okay. And this is who would play me if I was a if I was in a movie. I was like, okay. Other times the characters are very silent and they don't really give me too much information. And if that's the case, if they don't really pop out, I'm just like, you know what? I need to go back and rewrite you because you're very shallow. I don't like you having no depth whatsoever. So I go back and I just have to give them like a little personality quirk, something to make them stand out, and rather than just being a wallflower. So sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's later on, and I got to go back and just rewrite them or delete them altogether.
What's your approach to ancillary characters? Do you feel like, because you're now using a lot of them for the series you're writing with your husband as well, and so I'm curious, how developed do you get? How detailed do you get with them, and how much do you look at their roles in each story, or as will I develop them more?
Well, I like to think that each character thinks they're the main character in the story, believe it or not. I think so. So sometimes some of them will just steal the show in a scene, and it's awesome. And other times, they do slip back and they don't come out. But I always like to know, especially if they keep reoccurring, I like to know who they are and where they come from. And then if I know that if something happens later on, I'm like, oh, this should be useful because this character has a tie with that or this. So I like to personally flesh them out, even though I may not show all the information, but I like to know it so that if I need it, I will have it. Because who knows, it might make a whole new series.
So that being said, which character, when you gave them a little rope and gave them an opportunity, spoke out to you and said, hey, I want a bigger role? And how did they, what did you do with something like that? Were you appeasing them, or were you like, no, shut up, let me do this?
I cannot tell a character no, because then they will stomp out of the door and they will slam the door shut and give me writer's block. So I can't tell them no. But so I'd always let them see what happens. I know Vixen. She's an assassin character in my series. She's technically a minor character, but she's the one that everybody says that the top two favorite characters is Lorrek and Vixen. Lorrek's the main character. Vixen's technically a secondary character. And so she's the one that, really just has this personality, really strong personality. And so she likes to just steal the show, and it's awesome.
You have a complex world. I mean, there's kingdoms, there's magic systems, there's all kinds of things that are going on. And I'm curious, what do you feel like you spent more time on? Was it more laboring for the world building aspect, or did you feel like you developed the characters and the world kind of just evolved with the characters?
Well, I would say that when I was writing fan fiction, I was also writing like original characters, I was putting them on original worlds. So I wasn't always in the Star Wars universe. So I was developing some of these ideas already. And so when I finally decided I wasn't going to write any more fan fiction, to write my own, I took some of those ideas with me. So I already had some world created. But then I had all these other stories like that were even original fiction that I kind of never finished. I just poured from all of those ideas and I just put them into one universe. And it's really surprising how everything is coming together. So then I just had to find the plot, really, and then the characters came with that. And so, and the world just continued to grow and everything just continued to expand into what it is. And I'm really excited because there's so much more. I mean, it's already a pretty big universe, but there's so much more that I have not yet been able to introduce to people. But I'm like, okay, I just have to be patient.
In the Chronicles of Lorrek, there's 6 kingdoms. How did you separate one another, and what little distinctions did you give for readers so that they understood, what characters were moving from one place to another?
Well, you have the Northern Kingdoms, which is Norum, which is more mountainous, and that one has more of the arts and craft. That's what it's known for, arts and craft. And then you move to the east, and you've got Cuskalan, which is where Lorrek is from. And that is home of the ward orbs and handblades, which is very unique, and that's the only place you can find them and on that world. And that's a whole other story. And then you have Chikoram, which is actually a high-tech, very like cyberpunk kind of, kingdom. It has the flying cars, the skyscrapers, and everything. Everything else is medieval. And then you have, right beneath the form, you have Tallhorn, which is known for its neutrality. It doesn't get involved in conflict. That's what it's known for. And then you have a Soulhorn, which is known for its assassins and thieves. And then you have a Thorm, which is known for its pure magic and its black stone city, which has magical qualities. So, and how I came up with those ideas, I can't remember. It's been so long.
With the magical system that you're using, what are its origins, and what did you use? What kind of influences created that and kept it and kind of developed it for you?
The original idea actually came from a book from a spiritual book I was reading, and talking about how the imagination is part of your soul. And I was just thinking about the imagination. I was thinking how, to me, imagination is kind of magical. And so I just started playing around with that element. But at the same time, I was thinking of how the internet is kind of magical in a way, because all this information, and you can technically you communicate with anybody you want. So those two, like the imagination and internet, were kind of both kind of ideas. So it was a very vague magic system initially. And it's, as you progress through Chronicle, like it kind of solidifies, you see more. But you won't actually see it in its really hard form, a concrete form, until the series that my husband and I are going to be publishing soon, because that's when I finally said, okay, I want to really, because that's when runes come in to play. And so, because when they're on a different continent, and so magic is actually a little different there. So I was like, why is it different? Because it's still the same word, why is it different? And so I had to stop and ask myself that question and come up with a really good answer. And then I actually did. I came up with a really fascinating answer.
I'm curious, with fans of your series, what is the character that they bug you the most about and that they want you to write more about?
They want me to write a series based on Vixen. Because they all say that. I'm kind of like, I asked her if she wants to have a series, and she keeps saying no. She always keeps asking me that. I'm like, she doesn't want to be a main character. She doesn't mind being a secondary character or a second main character, but she doesn't want to be the main character. So, but everyone keeps on saying, like, I want Vixen. I was like, I'll give you lots of screen time in Vixen, but she doesn't want to be the main character.
How did you write Chronicles? Was it you wrote 3 books at a time, or did you write all 9 in session?
I wrote one book. Book 1 and 2 as one book. I was like, I'm done. And then I was like, and so I went back and started editing. I was like, oh wow, this is a really, really long book. I need to split in half. So I did that. Okay, I'm done now. Oh wait, there's a plot hole I forgot to fill. Okay, so I wrote book 3 and I fixed it. Okay. And then I was writing book 3. I came up with an idea for book 5. But before I could write book 5, I finally came up with an idea for book 4. And then I still had 5, 6, and 7. I had basically 5 through 9 figured out before book 4. But then I realized I needed book 4 too, so I wrote that real quick. So, but then by the time I wrote book 4, I already knew how many books were left over and so forth. So, yeah, because books 5 and 6 go back. You have to prologue and epilogue root you in the story, and then Lorrek uses the magic realm where you can view past events you can't interact with. You can only view. He's trying to learn some information that's only in the past. So he goes back 1,000 years in the past, and you get to see the entire story. That's book 5. And then he goes back 500 years in the past. That's book 6. And then finally in book 7, you get back in the present moment. He has all this information. He can finally go forward. So I didn't mean to do that. If I had written this in order, I would have done like book 5 and 6, then 4, then 1, 2, 3, and everything else. But I didn't know that was going to happen. So...
in writing it that way, I'm sure you learned a lot of obviously you wrote the first book with 2 books that eventually turned into 2 books. So you probably learned a ton with that one, but in your writing process, what are some moments that you feel like changed because of where you were as a writer? And try it, non-spoiler if you can, but the moments that you really feel like really were not going to be written unless you were at the point you were at as a writer.
Honestly, every book has a moment like that, and I can't think of any particular moment because every time I'm writing a new book, I'm always challenging myself. I was like, can I write a character like this and make everybody feel like this and then something, or can I really describe this? I'm always challenging myself so I can just keep improving my skill. So that's what I really am always doing. And so when I accomplished that, I was like, yes, I did it. And then I know that I can go forward. I can keep, if I needed that tool again, I can use it because I know I have accomplished it. One long one was I knew this big scene was this a major spoiler was going to happen, and I wanted to plant it through all these books. I was like, would anybody catch it before it's time? Would anybody? And nobody's caught it yet until it happens. But then they look back and like, oh, I can see it. I was like, duh. I was like, yeah, I know.
That's the thing I've always found fascinating about writing a series is the approach, because I'm a visual guy as well. I'm a filmmaker and I've done film, and I've also written novels. But the idea that you have one story to tell and it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and then you leave just enough to get into a second book, to a third book, and so on. And so doing the little sprinklings that you did there, do you feel like, is that a nuance that you learned, or did you always have an idea of how you were going to begin and end every single book, and how and what devices did you like to use? Are you a cliffhanger person? Are you somebody who likes to finish something and just start it at the end of the book for the next one? What is your approach to each book becoming into the next one?
Well, I don't typically do cliffhangers. I don't think I do, but some of my readers are like, why did you end it like that? I was like, what? It wasn't a cliffhanger. And they're like, I'm sorry, I thought it was done. And so, but honestly, what happens is it's like an event. There's an event that needs to happen. And once that event is, because that event, if that event doesn't happen, the next event won't happen. And so the first book or so is like trying to get that event either resolved or figured out. And then once that event's done, it naturally leads into the next events. Like there's ramifications or consequences and so forth. It all to me makes lots of sense where it begins and ends, because it's just like those sections. Each scene has its own section. And there's no need to overlap things or to cut things off too short. If it's a cliffhanger, it's a cliffhanger, but I don't intentionally leave cliffhangers because I don't like that as a reader. So I don't like to do that to readers. I like to sometimes surprise them at the very end with something, and then it just takes them a bit to recover from that. I also have bonus scenes at the very end sometimes in my books where if you read those, you will see the setup for the next book. You might not understand how it sets it up, but then once you get the next book, you read it like, oh, that's what that meant.
Is there gaps of time in between each book, or are you kind of staying on a linear timeline, moments of later?
Well, book 1 and 2 are like just back to back because I literally wrote them as one book.
Right.
Book 3 has a year between the 2 and 3. And in book 4, the beginning it's immediately after book 3, but that one goes back to Lorrek's past because there's something he forgot, some memory that's like forgotten, and he's trying to remember that, and he doesn't know why he's forgotten it. And so he goes back to his own past to when he's like 16 or 17 or 18, I can't remember, but he goes back to that age, which was fun to write. All my characters as younger, characters, goes back to that. And then book 5 also we have a prologue and epilogue that tie it in the moment. So book 4, 5, and 6 are technically in the present moment back to back. But because books 4, 5, and 6 technically go back in time, it's hard to answer that question. But once you get to 7, 8, and 9, they are all back to back.
I know you mentioned that nobody's figured out the major plot that you sprinkled in there, but I'm sure as an Easter egger, as somebody puts little Easter eggs in there, do you get a kick out of when fans find little things that you saw that you put in there for a reason?
Well, once they have finally figured out, once they have gotten to that point where they see the reveal, okay, then they can go back and like, oh, I remember that, and that's always fun. But if they don't have it, because it's not until much later in the series they actually get it. And so I'm kind of like, get to it already. It took me forever to finally write it. And when I wrote it, it was so much fun. So when they can go back and they look at it, like, oh, yeah, now I get it. I'm kind of like, But while they're reading, there's nobody contacts me going, hey, I think you're going to do something, aren't you? They don't talk about that. So until it happens, and then by the time it happens, they already forgot most of that stuff because it's all sprinkled in. So when it happens, they're kind of like, oh, and then they pause and they have to recover from that and then look back and like, oh yeah, I see it now.
That's a unique thing about readers. I think readers are a different animal in the fact that they trust the writer to give them what they want, right? They trust that the writer is going to treat them well, and they don't have expectations. They don't ask for things. They just let the story take its toll on them, and then react to it instead of asking for you to. Obviously they ask for more character developments and things like that. When it's over, they're probably like you said, they were asking, to continue characters' journeys. But that's the cool thing is they trust you. Do you feel that when you're talking to readers?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes a lot of readers will start asking me questions while they're reading it. I'm like,
yeah,
read it. Read it. Read it. The answer to the questions are answered in the book. I can't tell you the answer to that. Read it. And I have to tell them that all the time. I'm kind of like, just read the book until you finish the passage. Ask me questions then. But normally they ask me all these questions, and I always have an answer for it. But sometimes I'm kind of like, I can't tell you that because you read it. And so they have learned, to not ask me those kind of questions because I'm like, read it. That's the scene until I can tell you.
Yes.
So because I try to be very, very thorough, and I like to think of the questions the readers might ask, and I'd like to answer those questions before they ask. So I know they're going to ask that, so I'm like, I've got it. Just keep reading. So
when you finally got to the end, you knew what was coming. You knew how it was going to end. But when you finally got there, did you have any intrepidation? Were you looking at it going, I could probably continue this if I want to? Or were you happy to finally just end it and move forward?
I was happy to end it because I knew I was going to write other series based on the same universe that's going to deal with the ramifications later and so forth. So I was happy to be done with that series. I'm like, okay, the series served me well. It's complete though. I'm not going to drag it on. I don't have to. I'm going to move on. So I was glad to just be able to move on from it.
Was it hard to write that last bit though for you, even knowing you were going to move on?
That book is basically one major battle scene, just one major war. That's all it is. It's just like one after another, and so that in itself is intimidating and was hard to write. So when I got done with it, I was like, I did it. Okay, okay, it's good. I managed to do that. Awesome. I'm gonna take a break now. So it was really nice to be able to be okay. I did it. I didn't think because every time I get to a book, I was telling my husband, I don't know if I can write this. I don't know if I can do it. He's like, you can do it. And then I do it. He's like, see, I told you. So every time he's like, Kelly, you wrote this, you can write that. So I keep on like upping the stakes every time. And I always tell him, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And he's like, no, you can do it. So when I got done with it, I was like, oh, look, I did it. So.
I'm curious, over the course of Lorrek's journey, what did he teach you? What did he give you that you never expected he would?
I'm still learning, honestly. Teaching me stuff like, one thing that, I'm still trying to figure out one very interesting thing about him because he doesn't care about what people think. And I think that's actually very important in the world because, he knows everybody's going to blame him for everything that goes wrong. No matter how much he saves the world, people still blame him for everything that goes wrong. I don't know. There's something about his attitude that I'm still learning. When I go back and I write short stories and everything like that, I was like, there's something about you I still haven't figured out yet. Even though I wrote 9 books with you, there's still that one little thing. And it just, I don't know, it's just, he's a fun character and he's always teaching me, a lot. But mainly, his biggest story arc was, him realizing he didn't have to solve everybody's problems. It's okay to step back and let other people be in charge. And that was kind of, something I needed to know because I always try to be the one to fix people's problems. And so he and I were kind of on a journey together going, oh, you know what, you can't fix everybody's problems. It's okay to step back and not deal with it. So. You
kind of learned how to mentor yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Through him.
What do you feel like in the scope of it, looking back on it now, that's been past a little bit, and you've had some time to reflect a little bit on the Chronicles of Lorrek and separate yourself, and now you're getting feedback from other people and things like
Mhm.
that. But for you, looking back at it now, what do you feel like you carried over that you're applying to what you're doing now from that experience?
With my writing, you mean?
Yeah, with your writing, with is there anything that you got better at over time that you feel like?
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the universe. I'm still using the universe, and that's the Chronicles of Lorrek is the foundation for all the other series, and it's where all my ideas had come together. And I poured all these ideas from different stories I've never finished, and they all came together in this universe, and just continues to expand. So that's one major thing. But then, my ability to write space battles or medieval battles, or just any kind of description, and then developing really, really strong and unique characters, especially antagonists and so forth. All that, everything I did, like how to layer stories and plots and have multiple layers and manage all that spider web, all that was really just, to me, mastered kind of in that series. So now when I go to do a new series, I actually know from beginning to end how many books it's going to be, what the entire story is going to be, and it's easy for me to just go and start and just go through it. And I don't have to think as much of figuring out, can I do this? Because I know I can do a major space battle and medieval battles and everything like that. And I know I can do that. And if I can do that, then I can do basically anything.
So tell me, what does every artistic expression from Kelly Blanchard have to have in it?
A story. A really good, not exactly a message, because everybody will get different messages, but there needs to be a story. Like, I don't know really how to explain it, but the story is something that everybody can relate to, and it might actually encourage and inspire people to better themselves. So really, I guess you would say inspiration, to be honest, because a lot of people can relate to Lorrek with being blamed for bad things happening or being blamed for anything. So you can then see a character that's what his life is. So you can take from there. And then other characters, you have different things, and people might see themselves in there. And they can take inspiration from that and, decide, okay, you know what? Because Lorrek managed to defeat all these people or whatever, I can do it too. And so I guess it's more of a sense of inspiration. But I know with my paintings and so forth, it's more just like this is the description, this is the beauty of it. I really want there to be beauty and something that people can take away from it when they see it. And same thing with my books.
Hello everybody. So last night I got a message from a fellow author, and she had gone to a book fair or something like that, and she met with an author there, and the author immediately blasted her and just was very discouraging. And this friend of mine, she came back to me and she messaged me asking, if this author was right. And I am going to most likely rant, and I make no apologies for that, because it irks me when published authors, especially traditionally published authors, look down at people who aren't published or who are self-published. It really, really, really bothers me. So I am just going to lay out a few things. One thing this person told my friend is that she needed to research the market and figure out if anybody else wrote what she was already writing. So, okay, it is important to know what's on the market and everything like that, but here's the deal. When you are writing for the market, by the time you finish writing your book and have it ready for publication, it is likely going to not be what's selling. So you would have wasted your time if you were doing that, and you would be more discouraged. So here's a trick though, okay? If you write what you love and you believe in it, and you pour your heart into it, then when you are ready to publish it, it doesn't matter if it's not in a market. You make it into the market. Because guess what? For the market, the people who make it in a market are the people who make the loudest noise. They're the ones who have fans, who just get a fan base, and they create the trend. They create the market. And so it doesn't matter what was, you know, in the market when they started writing it. They make it to be the market. Now this isn't easy, of course, and it, you know, it takes a lot of try and error. So you still keep trying. You believe in what you do. Okay, you don't. It is important to know what is out there and what people are doing, but don't base everything you believe in on that, because that comes and it goes, it changes, and it's not something that we can, you know, grasp. It's like the wind, okay? So something else you said was that you need to check, see if anybody else wrote what you want to write. Okay. There's always a little bit of grain of truth to everything everybody says. Just a little bit. But here's the thing. There was this video I watched, and it was this parody of something, and this guy goes on stage and he's like, to be or not to be, that is the question. And then this other actor walks the stage. He says, no, it's not to be, it's to be or not to be. So they have like 6 to 7, 8 actors walk on stage. Each one emphasized a different word. Each one said exactly the same thing, but in a different way. They were all unique. I can't remember what that was. It was something, and some famous actors were on stage too. But anyway, the case is that each one of them said the same thing, but they said it in their own way. They had their own interpretation of it. So what I'm trying to tell you is, even if you write a similar storyline to somebody else, no one is going to write it the way you wrote it. No one is going to have the same writing voice as you do. No one's going to word it the way you do. And as long as you're not plagiarizing, you're okay. So it doesn't matter if the story's already been out there. I mean, look at how many, you know, Cinderella stories or you know, all the fairy tale stories out there. And look how they've been redone, and the way Shakespeare stories have been redone. And I mean, you have all these vampire stories out there. A lot of people do the same kind of idea, but they change it to their own. And that is what is important when it comes to writing. So yes, you can be like, you can check out, see if people wrote it, something similar, but don't judge. You don't decide to not write it because somebody wrote something very similar. Because remember, you have your own writing style. You have your own message you want to get across, maybe. You have your own theme. You are yourself, and your writing reflects that. So don't let people tell you you can't write something. Because as soon as someone says you can't do this, prove them wrong. Okay? Just prove them wrong. I'm giving you the liberty right now to prove everybody wrong who says you can't do this. Because they are normally wrong. Yeah, this topic kind of riled me up a little bit, because I can't stand people telling other people that they can't do something when they have all the capacity to do so. They just need the encouragement. So no, it's not a waste of time to write. It is not a waste of time to self-publish. You don't have to be ashamed of it if that's what you're going to do. And just, this is one reason why I don't recommend people going out and getting other people's advice too much. Like, well, what do you think of my story? And they tell it, because the way they tell it might sound like somebody else's, and that person might want to say that. And you don't want to get discouraged. So there's a delicate balance. You just have to figure out that balance.